Welcome to the Non-Human and AI Identity Podcast. I'm excited to have Alexis Moyes, CEO at Cloudy Security, join me today. We're going to be talking about when AI agents inherit risk, the NHI problem expands. Alexis, why don't you say hi, give a quick intro, and maybe share something interesting about you that people may not know.
Yeah, I'm Alexis Moyes. Like you said, I'm the CEO and co-founder at Clarity Security. I'm super excited to be here and finally get to come on the podcast. Something interesting about myself that I have no idea. My life and focus is kind of fixing identity as I see it, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that later. But for those who haven't met me, you will learn over the next hour that that is probably the most interesting thing about me today.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
All right, so look, we always start kind of the show with the Mr. NHI's human identity in the hot seat, where I fire 10 machine speed questions on identity security. So, Alexis, are you ready to take the hot seat?
Always ready.
All right. Are organizations taking NHI risks seriously enough?
I don't think organizations are taking NHI risk seriously enough. I unfortunately see this a lot, like the housing crisis in 2008 and everything that led up to it, where companies are prioritizing the speed and velocity and revenue generation that comes with the adoption of AI, with the proliferation of additional NHI to make everything run, and they're prioritizing the output rather than the security, right? Like, and everything that has come out over the last few weeks, all of the attacks, all the vulnerabilities, all the everything, there isn't a response by organizations to make changes. They're just acknowledging that it is now like a supply chain risk, accept it and move on.
Okay, interesting. Is the recent market activity involving identity vendors a good thing for the industry?
Um, yes and no. So the yes is at least people are trying to solve the problem and like rapidly are able to catch up to the problem. The no maybe comes from the fact that there is such a large explosion of new vendors doing new things. It shows a systemic problem within existing identity that we are not looking, like a lot of vendors are not looking far enough down the road to pre-address problems or aren't architecting themselves in a way that can extend beyond like traditional models, traditional kind of like organizations and to, well, I have 10 employees and 550 agents doing all of these things, et cetera, et cetera. It just shows the gap that exists that should not have ever been there. So good, yes, but sad for the longer term vendors.
Great insight, and I'm sure we'll discuss that more in a bit. And
Yep.
do you think IAM for AI is more important than AI for IAM?
I I do. I do think it's more important. The concepts of AI for IAM have been around forever. It's just at one point it was machine learning. At one point before that, it was heuristics and user analytics. Before that, it was like hard coded rules to make decisions for you, it was conditional access policies, so on and so forth. Like, I think it's just another iteration of how to make life easier for IAM teams. The much bigger problem in my eyes that needs to be solved is how do you apply IAM or security to AI?
Okay, yeah, I would fully agree with you on that. Do you think it's possible to truly govern and control agentic AI agents?
Um, in a perfect world, I do think it is possible to truly govern and control agentic. That perfect world, though, assumes that humans don't make bad decisions. I think there are a lot of mitigating controls that can be put in place. I think there is amazing technology out there to govern and control. But if a marketing person gets their hands on Claude and sets things up and uses like leverages their own right OAuth scopes or anything else and clicks go, it is very difficult to react to that, especially if it's like their own personal Claude on their own personal machine doing
Mm.
stuff for some reason. Like the human element will always be the hardest thing to control for.
Yeah, look, again, fully agree, and I can relate to that as well, just internally within our own group, including
Yeah.
my own sort of digital marketing lead that's playing quite a lot with Claude and enjoying it and using API keys and all the things they
Yeah.
say you shouldn't be doing, are being done. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's scary times. All right, this is an interesting question. Do you think AI agents will eventually need to be fired?
I I do. So I think something that is maybe confused me a little bit throughout, like with the narrative around NHI and AI agents, is why we think as an industry the building blocks for a healthy identity and a secured identity program don't apply to agents, right? Like their starting and ending point for lifecycle management is different than a normal, like a human identity, but that doesn't change the fact that they still experience joiner events, leaver events, and mover events, right? Just like non-human, traditional non-human identities
Mm,
themselves, right? We're onboarding a new application. That application runs its course. At the end of life of that application, you should kill off all of the non-human identities associated with it. When you don't do that is where you get into unmanaged, unidentified credentials that are very easily exploited. So absolutely, you need um, to apply like firing processes to agents and all
okay,
NHI.
right. Maybe a related question, but do you think the traditional IGA platforms can adapt to the new world of identity security with agents?
Um, I I hope so. However, I've been severely disappointed over the last 20 years of the ability of traditional IGA and candidly a lot of modern IGA is ability to actually adopt or adapt to the modern world, and it's because they're slapping security on to the name and replacing governance and administration.
Mm,
They are not security first companies. They are how do I make compliance easier and how do I automate lifecycle management faster? And that is my end goal of everything. It is not how do I apply security controls? How do I like actually build a long-term security posture that can deal with the comings and goings of new identity types, new right technologies that are getting brought into the business, regardless of it being your like a new ERP to the next cloud that comes out after this, right? You should have a platform. And we have seen over the last 20 something years that most IGA cannot do that when it's just humans. So no, I don't think traditional IGA will adapt in an effective way.
okay, that's some great insight there. Do you think agentic AI security equals NHI security?
Um, mm, Not necessarily. I think it's a little bit of square is a rectangle, but a rectangle is not necessarily a square. I have long held the belief that NHI and NHI security is more of the umbrella term and should be the umbrella term
Mm,
for anything that is not a human. And agents and everything else should fall under that. Um, Personally. So no, I don't think necessarily the same thing. its agents should be a subsection of NHI security as a whole.
Okay, that's a very interesting perspective. There are very strong opinions sort of
Yeah.
in the other direction as well. I'm kind of a bit on the fence myself where I think it lands. I think it's definitely a subset, but I think AI security or agentic AI security has many more challenges, right? Prompt injection, yeah, et cetera, et cetera. So I think there's a lot more I think you need to think about from a agentic security standpoint. Again, the debate will go on.
Yeah.
Do you think agentic AI workforce will lead to mass unemployment?
Um, I I think it will lead to mass unemployment. I mean, if the companies don't collapse that are running the world right now with like Anthropic and OpenAI, if they don't collapse and do cause mass unemployment themselves, I think it'll be a short term, like a transitionary period of unemployment that will come, and like we have seen. Um, throughout history as technology, like more and more revolutionary technology comes out, there is a period of, well, these types of jobs are no longer really of value because they could be replaced by technology. Those people aren't just going to sit around. They're ultimately going to change career paths. They're going to change what they do, how they do it, and move into different areas. Perfect world, obviously, right? Like, is people themselves do adapt and adopt to the times, like adopt the modern times. So I think it's a transition that may be a year, maybe 5 years. It's kind of hard to see right now. But I hope it's not a longer term thing beyond like a 5 year horizon.
Yeah, I hope so too.
Yeah.
Um, do you think agents are currently being deployed without security guardrails in production?
Um, yes. Is there a longer answer needed? I I do think so. Um, one of the, in my opinion, and what I've seen is agents not going through CI/CD and right, like just general basic code review, like concept review, user story review with technical teams guarantees that there are no guardrails in place. I'm just going to click approve and give my agent access to everything I have access to because I don't want to deal with figuring out what it actually needs to operate. I just want to get it done and into the hands of the end users is kind of the mentality.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, and do you think CISOs are ready for the fleet of autonomous agents that are coming?
Um, no, I don't. I don't like mentally, yes. I think they are aware that it's coming, and I think one of the answers I gave around organizations not taking NHI risk seriously enough, I think individuals are, I think CISOs are taking that risk seriously and are concerned. But like if we look back, right, we haven't really handled humans all that well. We haven't really handled like real permissions or effective permissioning all that well. We haven't handled service accounts very well. We haven't handled OAuth like anything very well. Like all other non-human has never really been handled that well at
Yeah,
scale. What makes us think that unless something changes, something radical changes on the identity side, we'll be able to handle something that is 50 times, 100 times, 200 times as many identities as humans, much less all of the rest of NHI.
great. And look, final question. Are you a fan of vibe coding?
Ooh, Uh, am I a fan? I wouldn't describe myself as a fan of anything other than the San Diego Padres. Uh, do I think it has a place? Yes. I think there are areas in all platforms where vibe coding can make sense, right? Like, hey, we are not a fan of this, that, and the other thing within our existing platform. I want to go just vibe code improvements to the UI. Like, make no fundamental changes to the platform. Just let's fix this button. Let's fix reactivity. Vibe coding is fine, right? But if you're vibe coding core functionality without building an understanding of what it is actually doing and like doing detailed code review and walking through things, you're you're up a creek without a paddle. Like you're that's a recipe for disaster. And I think we've seen plenty of small examples of that just come in to bite people already. So not a fan of that, but fan of it in other areas.
Okay, interesting. All right, that's the hot seat over. Hope you enjoy that.
Yeah, I did. I want to know your answers to some of these.
Right, you have to invite me onto your show, and then I can
Absolutely.
reciprocate. All
Yeah.
right, look, let's get into the main discussion now, right? When AI agents inherit risk, the NHI problem expands. I guess, like you touched on, Alexis, right? Look, most organizations are still grappling with dealing with NHI governance, management, security, right? Unmanaged service accounts, sprawling API keys, hard-coded credentials, right? And now agents are coming in at lightning speed. We've obviously got shadow AI. We've got anyone in the business now is claiming to be a developer, right, and able to
Yeah.
write code. Like when we think about, the NHA problem expanding, and when agents inherit risk, like what does that mean, or what do you think about that? Do you want to maybe share some perspectives on what you think at Clarity, what you're hearing from customers, what's your own personal views on that topic
Yeah.
to just kind of get us started?
Yeah. Um, and I'd love your take on my own personal take, but they're just kind of like digging into a single threat vector, right? Looking at the concept of like cross-pollination or separation of duty for like tiered access. So I am a tier one account, like I'm a domain admin that has access. I'm writing my own agents. I have access to absolutely everything in the environment. I can do whatever I want. I write an agent and I consent on behalf, like using my domain admin account rather than maybe a tier two user account or a tier three. Um, it's an accidental problem, or it could be an intentional thing that you're doing for some reason. And instantaneously, you are creating new domain admins within an account or within an organization that, unless you have tools in place, it won't get caught in IGA, traditional IGA. It won't get caught in just like hand spot audits within your other identity platforms. Like it allows for the accidental or intentional creation of super privileged accounts instantly. And if you have any semblance of misconfiguration on nested permissions, so I accidentally set up an AWS policy that gave full right into everything related to like our ECS or CloudFormation stack, misconfiguration that happened 5 years ago. That policy is applied to a role, which is applied to a group, and maybe with best intentions in mind, I give an agent that group permission or those assigned roles, and it is exploding the problem, right? And then I create
Mm,
another agent that has that same exact permission set, and then another agent and another agent, and it compounds incredibly fast. And if you're not looking for misconfigurations, instead of one or two people having that, or a few NHI having that, or service accounts, you now have 500 agents all leveraging a misconfiguration that could take down your entire company, right? So it just compounds problems that are there that nobody is finding, if that makes sense.
No, no, it does, and look, does resonate. Um, I think clearly with autonomous agents, right, that are going to be more goal driven. You know,
Yeah.
that's very different, right, to kind of the static kind of workloads that we had. That even again, having static, kind of broad permissions. NHIs typically needed kind of keys to the kingdom for whatever tasks they were performing, but you knew even though something may have had kind of excessive privileges, it still was doing a defined set of tasks.
Yeah.
But clearly now with an autonomous agent, if it's got a lot more access than what it needs, it can clearly do, a lot more things that you hadn't anticipated. So I think, yes, definitely, kind of the core concepts of things like least privilege become, even more and more important. Um, so how do you see kind of things with agents then evolving, in terms of kind of some of those core principles, right, around segregation of duties, least privilege, um, etc. Are kind of foundational to all identities, right? Whether it's human, non-human, what is it that agents are now doing or introducing that means we're going to have to do a big shift in how we tackle now identity going forward for, agents that are going to scale massively and be kind of, autonomous and, not be predictable, right?
Right. Um, that's a great question. And I think I would love your take actually on this as well. But some of the things that have to change in somewhat rapid order is right. Getting least privilege is a step in the right direction, but you have to start marrying least privilege with just in time or no standing permissions, like limited permissions to a specific workload that is running at a specific time. So provisioning happens at the beginning of the process, the fulfillment process, and then permissions are released at the end. Um, right, like I said earlier, the one of the biggest risks is standing unmanaged permissions. And if you have thousands, tens of thousands of agents that all have permanently standing permissions that are super elevated, again, are a recipe for disasters. So getting towards just in time, building workloads appropriately, building your agents appropriately to have temporary access for when a process is running and like have the permissions that they need scoped appropriately has to be there. And I think it's a joint effort between a security team, the identity team, but actually the development team to kind of work through how do you build agents in a semi-responsible way without inhibiting the business. Um, so it's technology changes, but also just process implementation.
Oh.
What about you?
Yeah, look, I do tend to agree. I think the kind of movement, sort of moving away from static kind of credentials, hard-coded, to kind of more dynamic, ephemeral credentials, that are generated just in time. There's obviously been a big movement for that anyway within the kind of broader NHI domain, right? All the core
Yeah,
issues that we have with managing NHIs have historically been because of the static nature that we
yeah,
have, lack of ownership, all the lifecycle processes. I think clearly with agents, because the path it may take can change, right? It's not predictable. Even sort of dynamic, ephemeral, just in time is clearly not enough. It's not like you're going to just get your permissions upfront as the agent instantiates. I think you just need to get, your identity for your workload for your agent as it instantiates, but then as it starts planning its activity, which could be clearly non-deterministic, you
yeah,
probably then need to start, doing more kind of what I guess people call in the industry kind of more intent-based, context-based, kind of real-time authorization. So I think that's clearly the big kind of game changer. I think that is very different to how we did things before with static workloads, even though the concepts of real-time authorization, were there in very niche pockets where, you had highly regulated banking environments where every request needed to be, fully, authorized, authenticated. But I think that's clearly, I think, the model that, we're going to have to get to with agents. Is that something you're aligned with? You agree? And what does that mean kind of for how you then have to think about managing identities that could spin up, for seconds and then, you know, it could be
Yeah.
very different, what something, an agent tries to do, that's unplanned.
Yeah. So one, yes, like technology wise, I think getting just in time plus intent based plus like real time authorization is the long term vision. Um, and certainly what we're building towards as well, and like what is a part of our NHI module. The being on the customer side and implementing tools at large organizations where revenue matters a lot more than anything else.
Mm.
Um, I have seen lots of amazing technologies that are the right way to do things come and go because in concept it's the right thing to do, but it inhibits revenue. And I think even with us, right, building kind of exactly in line with what you're talking about and what we're both saying right now, there is always a fear that implementing it impacts revenue or impacts the agents by a half a second. That half a second can compound. It becomes felt by an end user, it becomes felt by the business, and controls are softened, right? Like, I think most security vendors who care about security, like honestly care about security, could ramp their tools up pretty dramatically, but know that if they do, they would get fired by their customer base because it can be detrimental to revenue at times.
Mm.
That being said, it is a I think it'll be a collaboration long term between vendors that have aspirations to have the best, like build the best security and help organizations to have the most secure environments, and agent companies, AI companies to figure out like how do we create more seamless interactions. And I don't know if I have seen a lot publicly, a lot of relationship building between the secure people trying to secure agents and the people who enable the building of agents. Like we're running into completely separate streams
Mm.
with very little regard for one another.
That's some great insights, and I do tend to agree. Look, I was at the Keeping a Coal EIC conference. That was last week. So time goes so fast, and I think there's a lot of things we know we need to do to like manage agents properly, given the complexity they bring, and the machine speed at which they can act, and you know, decide what path they want to take. But I think there's a lot more questions being raised than answers. And look, I think yes, there's a lot of focus on doing kind of the best that you can, you know, with kind of the future state kind of strategy, which is that real-time intent-based. But none of that's easy. It creates a lot more complexity, where you then potentially could have points of failure, right? If you're having to have some kind of policy engine, proxy that kind of intercepts everything an agent's doing. Those are some pretty significant architectural changes that an organization would need to make. So I think it's going to be an evolution. I guess there'll be some that are leading at the forefront that will try and build, the architecture right from day one. But I think for many orgs, still struggling with dealing with human, identity, let alone non-human, right? So I
Yeah.
think, it's going to be interesting. How do you manage the clear risk that agents bring, and I think it's massive, right? We've seen some huge, incidents, databases being deleted, etc. I'm going to be talking about some of that at Identiverse and CSA in the next few weeks. But that kind of leads on to kind of an interesting question, and this may also then be a good segue where you can then start to share some thoughts on, what is cloud security? What do you do? But look, one of the hardest topics I think that gets asked in the industry, right, is governance, right? How do you govern AI agents, right? What does that look like in practice? Who owns it? How do we manage it? Which team looks after it? Like, I'm assuming you must get asked this question quite a lot with all the customers you speak to. You kind of, what are you hearing around how customers are trying to govern agents? What advice are you giving to your customers or others about when to think about governance and governing agents? Like, what would you share in that
Yeah.
regard?
I think it's a lot of what we've talked about, or a little bit of what we've talked about so far. The guidance that we're giving is there is a way to apply solid governance now without requiring large organizational shifts and without forcing your developers, or the people who call themselves developers now, that are in marketing, that are in sales, that suddenly have access to the world's first like autonomous coding platform. Right. Uh, there are ways to apply security controls and governance now. And one of the ways that we see is, rather than putting governance directly in line where you're forcing authorization and like have an authorization or policy engine in line, having one that is operating near real time based on right signals coming back and forth, permissions are being granted, we're seeing that data before it's actually being used, and then a platform like Clarity or others can actually step in and like cut it off before permission use continues. So you're kind of sitting alongside the pipe, right? And in traditional networking world, you have a tap that exists, right?
Yeah.
And you're tapping off the traffic and then inserting yourself as it's going along and able to like cut it off. That is an incredible first step. It's a pretty low touch and like low effort first step, and it allows security to kind of start to reel things in pretty quickly. And then long term, I have long held the belief that governance is an everybody solution and like an everybody initiative. It needs to start at the tippity top, not within like the CIO, but at the CEO level, right? And kind of be driven down, because it is being development is democratized really for the first time ever. You don't need to be a developer to be a developer anymore. Which means if the CEO is not driving things, if the executive team isn't driving things, if the board isn't driving things and saying like, we need everybody to feel and share this responsibility and let's work together, things will never things will never be fixed, and it'll always be just kind of a never-ending wild goose chase.
Yeah, definitely. That's some interesting thoughts there. I think definitely I would agree with some of what's been said. Look, I think that's also now a good segue maybe to share some insight on, what you do at Clarity, kind of where you started and how you see kind of your product, your capabilities starting to help, support organizations tackle some of the challenges of not only just human, non-human, and I guess now a big focus on kind of the agentic AI agents.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess a bit about us, like our vision is to create a world where humans, non-humans, agents are continuously governed by real-time risk assessment. Um, we want to create, again, a world where identity is no longer just like a nonstop project that it requires constant investment and like bolting on additional tools because identity governance traditionally has not gone far enough. And then you get like an IT or like a identity posture management tool that has to do things and so on and so forth. And we want to make audit just kind of like the byproduct, or the automation the byproduct, where the first goal is securing and governing based on like real-time risk assessment. So that is what we're doing here at Clarity. And where we started, like I said maybe a few minutes ago, I was a security practitioner well before starting Clarity. Lived this life. I worked at Texas A&M when I was a student, and then afterwards for a bit, dealing with 80 to 120,000 human identities, hundreds of thousands at the time, non-human identities that were making everything run. So I got experience with the problems and like the lack of security that was available. Went into the private sector and realized that even if you have an infinite budget, there are massive gaps in the actual security controls that come along with investment in identity. Decided enough was enough. Like identity governance shouldn't be lying to customers on the outcomes that they may see, and they shouldn't be selling disingenuous products. So I wanted to build a solution that would help me and then help my friends and grow from there. And I think we've done a good job so far, but our mission is nowhere near complete. Like, until we fix every company on earth, it's never ending.
Okay, and what are some of the capabilities that you've developed or released? Kind of any key insights you want to give on how you're going to help in that overall mission, what customers can take
Um,
away in terms of what unique capabilities you provide to the
yeah,
market?
yeah. So high level, everything, like I've said risk probably 500 times on this so far, but everything is built on our risk assessment engine it's using both a deterministic model for best practices, everything that we're seeing, right, and all of the research being done day in and day out, we're pulling that in and assessing against what we're seeing in an environment, plus a non-deterministic model that we have that is looking for constant misconfigurations, giving suggestions on how to fix those. So not just like, hey, I'm detecting anomalous access that somebody is using or anomalous behavior, but 10 steps before that, we found misconfigured policies. We have found these issues with how federation is set up. We have found these issues here, here, and here. This is like the risk posture. Click these buttons and we will fix it for you. Or if you want to involve other teams, feel free to do that. So we're trying to identify both real time as things are happening, but well beforehand. So our risk and kind of posture management, identification, and remediation capabilities are kind of second to none. And then from there, just a bunch of amazing tooling around and visibility around how like the attack paths that exist, how like attack paths are actively being used, kind of everything else, plus all of the amazing tools that have already existed within identity governance. I know I talk a lot of crap about IGA, but there are a lot of amazing tools that have kind of cropped up. And so best lifecycle management we can possibly offer for both humans, non-humans, and agents. So we have tech on how we believe LCM should be applied to agents. Yeah, so a lot going on, and we just released our put out our press release for Clarity Aperture, which is our version of Clarity 2.0 plus our non-human modules. So there's a lot more to read and more to come. Podcasts and webinars coming out soon on all of that.
Okay, thanks
Yeah,
for that insight and congrats on your big release.
thank you.
Like as we start closing this session. It's been fascinating chatting with you, hearing your insights. If you were to share some advice, whether it's to a CISO, an architect, a security practitioner, like trying to think about how to start tackling, managing, governing, NHIs and obviously agentic AI risk more seriously, what would you tell them they should start doing immediately going into next week?
Yeah, going into next week. Um, Man, uh, the first one is have yourself a good cry and recognize that this is just another massive problem that we have to solve as security practitioners. But like the ones that have come before it, we've been able to crack the code. So take a breath. We'll find a way through this. Two, hold your vendors accountable. If they're not able to get you the visibility and like the tooling you need, hold them accountable to do so. And then from there, look into and start evaluating tools as fast as you can that can deliver the security, but also the value to the business at a low enough cost, like in recognition that budgets are tight, right? So in proof of concepts, in your evaluations, make sure that the vendor can show ROI early, right? And you can start assessments today of tools. And I would start assessing, start reading, listen to all of the other Mr. NHI podcasts to get more insight outside of just my own opinions. Yeah, educate yourself, inform yourself. I think that's the first real step. Acknowledge there's a problem and start learning.
Okay, some great advice. All right, look, as we now wrap up, is there anything final you wanted to share in terms of closing? If folks wanted to learn more about what you do, where can they go? How can they find out more?
Yeah. Yeah. So if you want to learn more, obviously claritysecurity.com, or we're going to be at a number of conferences over the next 4 months where we're happy to meet anybody and everybody. But Identiverse is kind of the nearest term one. Gartner as well later this year. We'd love to meet you. My co-founder and I both are in most of the booths. So if you want to interact with me or tell me I'm wrong or tell me how right I am, happy to hear both sides of it. Yeah, or you can reach out to Team Clarity at claritysecurity.com for, again, more information.
Okay, fantastic, Alexis. And I guess touching on Identiverse, I do want to plug that a little bit more.
Yeah,
Obviously,
please.
it's only 2 weeks away. Well, I guess the day we've actually recorded this session, June the 15th kicks off. Our NHI management group is hosting probably the largest non-human and agentic AI identity summit, of its kind in 26 on the 15th in the morning. And pleased to say, Alexis, you're going to be joining us on one of the panels. So thank you for your contribution there. And then we've got a huge pavilion dedicated to non-human and agentic AI. So I think there's going to be some great vendors, just within the pavilion and beyond. I'm sure everybody's going to be talking about what they do from an agentic AI
Yep.
standpoint. But I think to your advice, I think, as much as they can learn from all the vendors, understand how they're approaching the problem, how they're dealing with governance, how do you manage the IM challenge, authorization. There's going to be so much information. There are so many players in the market. But look, I think the event that's coming up is going to be fantastic. There's lots going to be great sessions, talks. So I'm very excited to see you again, Alexis.
Yeah, likewise.
It's been a while, and I guess just an interesting story for folks. The first time we ever did a kind of a booth conference was nearly 2 years ago back in Washington, and
Yep.
that's where I think we met right for the first time. So we've got
Yeah.
some nice history together. So really looking forward to Identiverse. Hope people can come and join. And then in closing, please subscribe to our podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple. You'll even see us on TikTok with lots of shorts if you want as well. and nhimg.org. We've got now over 5,000 articles all about NHIs and Agentic, a great training course. So there's lots of great content and insights on various vendors, including Clarity, that you can learn about through our site or directly through Clarity's website as well. So with that, Alexis, thank you very much for joining the Non-Human and AI Identity podcast.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
Thanks.
This has been fun.